Everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Nicole Porter, and we're going to talk about non-for-profits and social media for non-for-profits. And as I said to Nicole, I'm glad I spelt non-for-profits right in the title, because I realized a bit later on after I set this up, I was spelling it wrong. Anyway, you've got an interesting journey that we're going to talk about. How you got into social media. But first and foremost, where can people find you?
My most active platform is LinkedIn. So most people can find me on LinkedIn under Nicole Porter. Or if you're a Facebook or Instagram user, I'm under Monomoy Social Media.
Fantastic. Thank you. So you made chocolate for 10 years.
I did. I made chocolate for a very long time. I got my degree in marketing while Mark Zuckerberg was still building Facebook in his dorm room. So things were a little different back then, and
Yeah.
went into the chocolate
For
industry.
many people, if you tell them the internet didn't, is only something relatively new, they don't believe you, do they?
No, my kids certainly don't. But it was a very different landscape, and marketing was very different back then. And even when I first started using social media was very different when it first started as well. So yeah, I got my degree, did a couple other jobs, and then went into the chocolate industry for about 10 years. And that's really where I started honing in on using social media to market the chocolate. And we did ice cream and all kinds of things. Had a brick and mortar shop. And then when my second son was born, it got to be very labor intensive. I moved my chocolate making to my home kitchen, and that's when I really relied very
Well, your kids
heavily
would
on
love
the
you.
internet.
Your kids would love you if you're making chocolate in the kitchen all day, every day.
They, they sure did, and I have the pictures to prove it. So maybe we'll throw some of those throwbacks up on my on my social one of these days. I've actually not thought about doing that, but I think that would make some great content because I have pictures of them faces covered in chocolate, licking this bowl, marshmallow. I mean, they were young at that point. They're 12, 15, and 8 now, but they were the older ones were 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, they were they were right in the thick of mom's making chocolate. This is great. Um,
I think Nicole, is that at that point when you were working on using chocolate, and then you started experimenting with social media. At that point, I don't think that there were any rules, as if there are any really, on how to use social media. So it's people like you who have been at the vanguard of social media, who did all the experiments to say, oh, that didn't work, oh, that didn't work, this worked. The other people that actually have defined the marketplace in terms of what it is. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of trial and error at the beginning. Like you said, there weren't rules. You didn't know what to do. Algorithms were different.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of yeah, like you said, see what works and then do more of that. And I think certain things hold true from back then to now. That authenticity piece, I know that's a kind of a buzzword that people use a lot, but back then and today, that's a lot of what social media really brings to the table is you're able to connect with your audience in real time. And so both in making chocolate and then now using it for business, for social media, like doing that as a business, it really that holds true. People want to see, they're still voyeuristic. Human nature hasn't changed. So when you're able to connect with your audience on these platforms and you're able to show the true people behind your business, that piece I think has over the years since the very beginning, that one thing has really stayed. And I think it will continue to have that staying power as we move forward.
Yeah, I remember writing a social media strategy for my local restaurant back in 2014, because in those days I thought that's kind of what I wanted to do, and I look back at it, and actually a lot of the things that I wrote in there haven't changed, which is that the owner is the most important thing, because in effect the restaurant is the owner, which is, we now use the term authenticity. And then it was about, okay, we're then going to work backwards through all the other suppliers. So where do you get your beef burgers from? where'd you get your spaghetti from? And then work back through the authenticity of all those suppliers, and kind of it's then a force multiplier to bring that together. And that's kind of no different than what we would do today.
Absolutely. Because they could see those curated photos anywhere. They can go to your website. You've always been able to put out a photo in a magazine, a photo in a newspaper, something like that. And websites, they're a little bit older than social media. And they've also changed a lot, but they're still a bit more static in that way, where that you can go there and you see a curated feed of what people want you to see. And that's where social media differs, because you can't see the owner in the back putting away his stuff in the freezer. You
Yeah.
can't see him creating a new recipe 9 times out of 10 on any other place besides social. And that's why people are drawn to it, because they want that human connection. They want to know there's a real person behind the business, and they really are attracted to that. And so I always tell my clients that the more we can show them, the better their presence is going to work. And some people are a little reluctant to do that.
Yes, they are. But ultimately, I got a meeting with a high-end fashion person. It was a designer, and they were selling pashmina scarves for $1,000. And the average person went in and spent $20,000. That was that. So to plan for the meeting, I went and read the top 10 things to do in fashion social media, and realized actually that was for this person was completely wrong. Because actually, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you're making chocolate or you're making $1,000 pashmina scarves. It's still the individual and the owners that are the important thing that we want to get into. Anyway, I digress. You set up you started getting really successful in social media, so you set up your own social media company, and you started working with non-for-profits, which are very different because they have members or donors. I have a friend who works for Greenpeace in the IT department, and they're often dealing with people who are activists, because the activists are quite often the donors. So it's very different from people that may be buying your product. So how do you see it being different?
So often it's similar to what you were saying. They have a very different audience, and they often will have dual audiences, because you have your donors, you have your volunteers, you have all those folks that are maybe working behind the scenes in the organization, but then you also have the folks that you're trying to serve with your organization.
Yes.
And you're going to reach those people in different ways. And so often what you're doing is you're looking at different platforms for that. So the folks that are the donors and the volunteers and the folks that are working behind the organization are probably using a different platform than the people that you're serving with your organization. You also need to think about your messaging and how you're reaching those folks with the type of content. So for instance, donors might be, what's that?
Give us an example.
Yeah, so if we're looking at one of the nonprofits I work with is called Social Capital, and they're north of Boston. They're working with, they do a lot of stuff in the community, and they're very community oriented. So, but they also have a big fundraiser every year with local legislators and whatnot. And those folks are going to be on a different platform than the folks they're serving, right? So the elderly people that they're raking leaves for, they're running a food drive for, they're the youth, they do a lot with youth and AmeriCorps. All those folks are using social media very differently than the legislators and the folks in government that might be trying to help them with their organization. So what we do is we're looking at, okay, we're going to put maybe something out on LinkedIn, and we're going to put something out on Facebook, and we're going to use photos, and we're going to use graphics to capture those people that we want to volunteer, to donate, to connect with those legislators, government officials. And Twitter actually is very good for that as well. Now, if we're looking at youth, we want them to join AmeriCorps. We want them to become members. We want them to volunteer. We want them to be involved in the programs. We're looking at using Instagram. We're looking at using Reels. We're looking at using stories. We're looking at, short video. And that's the type of content and the platform that's going to reach the people they're serving. Whereas over here, we're using very different platforms, very different messaging, and different types of content to reach the folks that are going to be behind the scenes in the organization. So you have these almost dual strategies. When you're working with a nonprofit, you tend not to have just a single strategy like you would with a restaurant, a lawyer, somebody like that. It's going to be more straightforward. They're just going to be using, the one strategy to reach the folks that they want to come in the door. With nonprofits, there's two different things you really have to be looking at 90% of the
It's
time.
complex, isn't it?
Yes, it sure is. But it's fun, and I really like that part of it. And I really like the service part of it. So the strategy part of it is super interesting to me. So that's why I love the nonprofit.
So how do you go about building a strategy for nonprofit? Is that, do you run a workshop, or what do you do in terms of building that strategy?
So it generally starts with a very in-depth conversation about who they're serving, how long they've been around, what their goals are, where they've been, where they want to go, what they're currently doing. It's a lot of information gathering to start because we need to know what's happening before we build that strategy. And then from there, we start looking at their demographics. Where are we going to show up? And then, similar to the example I gave, we start thinking about the types of content we're going to be putting out. And then we start putting together calendar outlines, very basic overviews of, this is what we want to see in the next few months. And then we start building content from there. So it very much starts with a lot of in-depth information gathering before we can do anything else.
And I guess you're as you say, you're probably talking to different generations, different demographics, maybe even people that don't use social media, through to, as if you're consuming reels or on Instagram, then you're probably fairly you kind of know what social media is.
Yeah, it's there usually is a wide range of demographics that we're serving. And it also depends on the nonprofit themselves. If they're more community oriented, then we want to make sure we're getting out in Facebook groups. If they're nationwide, are we looking at Twitter and trying to get folks over there? So it also depends not just on the demographics of, age wise and who you're trying to reach that way, but also what the nonprofit itself does, because that can also make a big difference in your strategy, whether on the platforms you're showing up on. Are they, do you have people on TikTok? Do you have a really, really young audience where you need to show up on Snapchat? If you're trying to reach high school students, then that may be a place for you to show up. So it depends on what you're doing and where you're doing it. And there's a lot of factors. It's not just show up on Facebook and put out a video and then that's it. It's very different. And the other piece that a lot of people don't take into account is the fact that it's social. It's very social. It's not static. So you need to talk to people. You don't just put out your content and forget about it. People are going to respond, and you have the ability to go and talk to other people. So if you're trying to reach a youth group and that youth group has a Facebook page, you should be talking to them over there. You should be commenting on their posts. If there's a legislator on LinkedIn that you want to stay in touch with, your organization should be commenting on that post. So that should also be a part of your strategy that many people do not take advantage of. A long, long time ago, when I first started doing social as a business, I heard the phrase, it's social media, not marketing media. So it's very important to talk to people and kind of meet them where they are, which is they want to be interacting. They're showing up on these platforms for that interaction and for that conversation. So it's a piece that most people do not take advantage of, but it's very effective.
I totally agree with you. For me, social media is about conversations, and having those conversations. And I think I just made a note of meeting people where they are, which is so important. And you have to be confident to go in and join the conversations or start conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can do that strategically. We actually keep spreadsheets for a lot of our clients because there's certain people that we want to make sure that we're staying in touch with and we're showing up to their audience as well. So you don't, because social media can definitely be a bit of a rabbit hole. You don't want to just go on and scroll and kind of lose track of time. But it can be very effective to go out and comment on other people's posts, or a lot of times you can, like you said, start the conversation. You can present an idea and maybe tag a few people that might, are going to have something to add to that conversation and keep that conversation going. So it's, there's a lot of different ways to converse with people, and you just have to find what works for you, and maybe go a little bit outside of your comfort zone. And also put it in your schedule, because I do find that that one piece will go to the bottom of your to-do list, because if you don't have the time, like, oh, I'll just comment tomorrow, I'll just do it later. So if you can even put aside 15 minutes to say, I'm going to interact with people, I'm going to start this conversation, this is something that is important to me, then you'll be sure to make that happen, as opposed to, okay, I just need to do that, it's just on my to-do list.
And I agree with you that in some cases you have to create spreadsheets, because what you're looking for is that there are going to be a certain set of maybe people who are influential. I don't want to use the word influencers, because immediately we start thinking about Kim Kardashian. But there may be certain people in that marketplace who are influential, and in a way you need to track those interactions. I mean, it is as methodic and as process orientated as that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that way that it's going to happen. And I'm not suggesting that you do things inauthentically. So if there's somebody that you want to stay in touch with and you just don't have anything to add to the conversation, going in and saying, "Hey, nice post," is probably not going to do what you want it to do. In that refrain, having that spreadsheet can be very helpful, because then, okay, well, I didn't comment today, but maybe they'll have a post in the next few days that I will find that I can add value to, and I can engage in the conversation much better. And then you'll be able to track it that way, so it doesn't go by the wayside. Because the last thing you want to do is just show up and have somebody think that you're just doing it for the likes and views. You want to engage with these people, show your expertise, show your thought leadership, and really kind of stand out. That's kind of the point of doing the whole thing. So, you don't just want to go and, good job on the post today. Like, that's not at all what I'm suggesting.
I've seen,
that's
I saw something, Elon Musk shared something recently, which was a screenshot from LinkedIn, where clearly somebody was using a pod, which and all that you got under someone's post was people saying, "Great post, great post, great post, great post, great post, great post, great post," which is clear the person hadn't, but they'd just been told to write something, and it's just so obvious that they're just trying to game the system.
Yeah, and that's frustrating as a user and a viewer. Nobody wants to see that, and I think that some of the algorithms are kind of getting wise to that too,
Yes.
because you will notice when that starts to happen, it doesn't do what you want it to do. It really is when you start to have those authentic, real conversations, that's when your post is going to show up to more people, and it's going to show up. You're going to show up to that person's audience as well. So, for instance, if I'm commenting on somebody's post and there's a web developer and they have a similar audience to me, I want to be showing up to their audience. But again, if I'm saying great post on that web developer's post, their audience isn't getting anything from that. So, but if I can actually add to the conversation, they're going to say, "Oh, wow, she's knowledgeable. I wonder what she's showing on her platform." And then they start to kind of come over. So it's not just to boost it up for views. It's really to show that you have an expertise in a certain field. And that piece right there is, I think people know, oh, well, I have to comment, but they don't understand the intricacies behind commenting and what they're trying to do with it. It's not just like gathering.
So is there any more advice, Nicole, would you have for non-for-profits and social media?
My goodness. I think beyond what we've already talked about, the interaction piece and scheduling that one piece in, the more authentic, the better. So when you're able to show volunteers doing something or people you're serving, the more you can show those behind the scenes type, the footage, then that will also expand your presence. And I think just probably looking at the big picture and looking at you're 6 months out and saying, okay, making sure that you have somebody, okay, we have this event coming up, who's going to be doing the behind the scenes photos, and really planning that in. I think it sounds silly because a lot of people will still go, okay, what am I going to post today? And that's really not where you want to go with this. So really looking ahead, creating that strategy, making sure that people have these jobs so that the actions you want can happen. I think that's probably one of the bigger things, because the people really do not plan ahead, especially in the smaller nonprofits. And I think that's very important.
Nicole, thank you so much for coming on. Clearly, you understand a lot about social media. Thank you for that. Nicole, where can people find you?
LinkedIn is the best one, and I'm under Nicole Porter. monomoysocialmedia.com, and on Facebook and Instagram, and my website as well. And thank you so much, Tim, for having me on today. This was a pleasure.
No. I've been sitting back listening to a master of social media. I mean, I love it when I meet someone who knows their, I was going to say shit then, but who knows their stuff about social media. I do enjoy it. So thank you, Nicole, for coming on and sharing that.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.